ladies. We didn't have time to do the corner of the table topper, so I wanted to take the time to stitch it out and show you how to do it. The first thing you're going to do is load the clover design bitty blocks. So what you're going to do is in the quilting section that you paid for on Kimberbell and downloaded, you will find both the directions for the bitty blocks and the files for the design. If you did not buy the quilting instructions, you do not have the file for the clovers. I hope that makes sense. The next step is once you've loaded it into your machine, you need to select the hoop that you want to use. And you can see that I have selected the 120 by 120 hoop. So in our machine, you're going to tap hoop options right here. And the options are going to be listed right here, and you'll select the 120 by 120 and then close that option. So now I have hooped the stabilizer, no show mesh, in that small hoop right here. Okay, don't forget to press it, and well, not press it, steam it like I showed you in class. All right, hold the iron above it and maybe about an inch or so and hit it with lots of steam. Okay, so now I'm ready with my stabilizer. Next up is my fabric, and what I'm going to cut, and I cut these for your kit, is a 3-inch square of black. I did put the stabilizer on the back per instructions. Then I cut a piece of batting 3 inches as well. Now you're going to do this to make 4 of these, so you have to cut, or well, I included, I'm sorry, the 4 blocks here, and then the 4 pieces of batting is what you're going to cut. And then you'll have to press that to the back. So that's the prep to get ready to stitch the blocks out. Now, when we go back to the machine, you'll see that the stitch out starts with this first color. That first color is right here, and it appears to be blue on the color choices. So these are just stops. As you've noticed, as you've worked through these files, these are just the stops so that you can do a step. But what I wanted to point out is I wanted to change the clover so you could see it, and it does, the color that they chose was yellow, and it doesn't show. But you should be able to see the yellow stitching right there. Okay, then the other day in class there was some question about selecting the options, and if I go into the settings, you'll notice that I turned active stitch technology off temporarily. And the purpose of doing that is this is a straight line of stitching, and it is sewing in the embroidery hoop. And that tends to make loops because the design is a sewing file rather than perhaps an embroidery file. So that I hope that makes sense. So now that I'm ready to go, I have my design in the middle of the hoop. They typically come in the middle, but I make sure they're in the middle so that I tap the move screen and tap right in the middle on that radial dial. And then I hit go right there. And it's checking. If you have the icon too and you don't want to see this every time, you can check this, don't show this information again. So you just check that. All right, come on. There it is, and hit OK. Then it brings the arm over. It tells you to hoop the 120 by 120 hoop. Now I like to move the screen over so that I can see what I'm doing. And that is I misspoke. The blue is for the inside of the block or the batting placement. So let me line that up. All right. Okay. So then the green is for, so you lay your batting down, and then this is stitching the batting in place. Now, I had trouble with a Sweet Talk design because these squares were way too small for the, well, what they were is that they were exact. If you cut them at 2.5 inches, they were exact. But I added like 1/2 inch on each side to, well, maybe not 1/2 inch, but I cut it at 3 inches so that I could have some margin. Then the next step, which is in red, is the placement for your fabric. And so again, I made your pieces of fabric a little larger too. So we'll see how this turns out. So then the last step, well, tack down of the fabric. The last step in this case is that clover, but when you load your file, you'll notice it's yellow. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So I'm going to go back to number 1. So when you do this step of clicking through the stitch out, then you can see which is stitching first and second, third, etc. Okay, over here. So let me try and give you an angle that you can see a little bit better. Not sure if it'll work. There we go. How about that? Maybe you can see that better. Now I do have my cutter on, and sometimes I turn my cutter off, but I wanted to turn it on with the jump stitches so I could show you guys that have the icon too, my little trick. So I just need to get a hold of this thread right there. So I make the thread a long piece of thread. Can you see that? I know it's hard, but I think you can see it. So then what I do is I hold that, and then it cuts it, and when it's done at the last minute, I pull it out. And that keeps it from nesting on the bottom of the stabilizer. Okay, now I'm going to put the batting in place, center it as best as you can, and stitch the tack down. If you want to, you can hold this down with tape. And now it's going to go around again. Remember, placement is 1 stitch around, tack down is 2 times around. Then if you have the option that you can bring out your hoop to trim, and in this case, it's hoop options right here. Go ahead and tap that and select the trim position. And what it does is it brings the hoop forward, making it easier for you to cut around the batting and trim it down. Try not to get my hand in the way. Not always possible. Okay. And this is where it gets tricky. Let me try this side first. And don't forget, you can take it out. Like if I take this out right now, just don't take it out of the hoop. So if it's hard for you to trim, and take it out of the machine, just not out of the hoop. And trim that down. Okay. And then slide it back in place. And now remember, it doesn't cut between, oh, look at that, I have a mess. I was hoping see, if you turn that off, you're not going to have a mess like that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to stitch around the placement line for the fabric. Then I'm going to quarter the piece of fabric to find the center. So I fold it in half and then in half again to make the quarters that will turn into the center. I know you can't see that because it's tough on black, but you understand the concept. So then I'm going to line up the center horizontal lines with the horizontal markings on my hoop, and then the vertical lines on the hoop. Now, with the Janome and the Topaz, and well, the Epic 2 has the markings because it's the same hoop. But with the other hoops, you'll find, and Denise, your Creative 3.0 is the same. So you'll find that the markings right here will help you align it so that it will be in the center. And now I typically will tape it down because I'm trying, this is not the batting, which is not seen. This is the fabric, and I really don't want it to be crooked. So I just put tape over the corners like so. And then right here. Okay, just like that. So now this is my tack down of the fabric. And it's important that you do not use black for this. So I use the color, see that? I didn't have that centered. So that's why it didn't stitch down. So what I'm going to do is try and do the best I can, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut on this line. So essentially this is my cut edge. So now I know better, and I left that in, so if that happens to you, you can fix it or avoid it. And now, there you go, stitching the clover. Okay, and you're done. And you remove your hoop. There's my hand again. So it looks like that. I hope you can see it. Right there. Okay, now that my embroidery is done, I am going to go back to embroidery edit. And what I wanted to show you, if you have a color, sort, and merge option, You can do all 4 of these at once. And the best way to do that is to go to hoop options, change to your bigger hoop, 260 by 200. And now you'll see, I'm going to shrink this a little bit so you can see it. And now you'll see, here's the first one. I'm going to put the first one right up here. Down in the edits design, I am going to copy and paste or duplicate. All right? There's the second one. And I'm going to put it right there. Now, by choosing these and starting with the first one in the upper right-hand corner, that's how it's going to stitch. So this one will be first, this one will be second. You're going to duplicate number 2 and bring it down for number 3. And I like to use the grid to line it up. It's not going to matter in this case, but, you know, that's me. And then duplicate it, come on, and put it over here. All righty. So what that is now is 4 clover corners to stitch out at once. This will stitch first, second, third, fourth. Now I'm ready to go. Hit go. And it brings it over. And what you have to do now is you have to find your color sort. And so you see it sorted it all, and color merge. And what that does is it will stitch all 4 of these first. You put the batting down over them. Whoops, I don't want to do that, sorry. And then it'll stitch all 4 of these. Then it will stitch all 4 of the placement lines for the fabric, all 4 of the tack down lines for the fabric, and then lastly, it will stitch the clovers. And so as you can see, let me pull this out a little bit. If I go to 1 5, 2 5, 3 5, 4 5, it will stitch it exactly in the order that I placed it in the hoop. So I hope that makes sense. It does save time doing the corners. I can understand if you don't want to do the gnomes this way. Well, it's impossible, actually. But you can do 2 blocks of the centers at a time if you choose to. Now, not everybody has a color sort and color merge option. So you'll have to look for these symbols in the software, but only in the embroidery stitch out, because it's not in the edit screen, it's in the stitch out screen. So now once I've done that, then I have all 4 of those corners, and I go back to embroidery edit, and this is a screen for embroidery edit, and I can go ahead and save those if I want to. I'm not sure that I will, but what I do is I have a folder named Cuties, and so I want to save it in my Cuties folder. I need to rename it. So you should all have functions that you can save your design. So make sure you rename it so you know what it is. So what I'll do is delete this, and then I'll label it Shamrock, and R-O, whoops, didn't tap the R, C-K space 4. Whoops. And hit save. So now when I go to my folder, I can see that there's my shamrocks. Now I have already the bunnies loaded, the center bunny and then the budding triangles. I haven't loaded the borders yet. But what I can do is I can create separate folders, with, just like I have done here with Snowman and Sweet Talk. And basically on your machine, you're going to open a new folder. You're going to rename the folder. In this case, I'm going to name it Gnome. And I'll tap 1. And then the only way that I have figured out to save it, because in this case it doesn't appear to be a move icon, is I can tap that and I can copy it, then open up the Gnome folder and hit paste. And there it is. That's the only way I have found out. Unless you do it on your laptop. It's a little easier on the laptop to move them. But that doesn't take that much time. Then when you go back here, you know that this one is already saved, and so I delete it. And then I'll go back and do that. See, now what it did is it brought that up in its place. And then I can delete all of these. If you have an icon 1, you just slide it to the left. If you have an icon 2, you tap options and hit delete. And it'll delete it. So that's one way of deleting it. Another way of deleting it is selecting the design and then long hold and hit delete. Oh no, 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 no. See, I don't want to do that. So I want to long hold and hit delete. And there's the next one. Long hold. Come on. There you go. Delete. And then the last one. This is where it gets tricky. So I'll probably move this. There you go. See, I'll take this one, move it off. Whoops. See, they're not together. These aren't grouped. So if that's the case and it's too difficult, go into your layers and select the one that you want to delete, which is that last clover, and then delete it. And now you're good to go. So now I'll bring this, of course I'll have to change the hoop to get everything lined up, but I'm going to take this design, put it in the center, and then, of course, change the hoop to 360 by 260 for me. Some of you have 360 by 200. And now I can save both of those. Okay, I'm running a little slow this morning. I'll open up and change that to Gnome Triangle. See, because if I didn't change the name, it would save over the shamrock. Whoops, put 2 spaces, triangle. And then this time, I'll make sure delete it and delete it again. Close this screen, check my folders, and you can see that it should be in the Gnome folder here. There it is. And then I can delete this one. Now I tried dragging this like this. See? It won't let me. See? So that's why I was hoping it would let me, but it won't. And so I would do the same thing for the center, the border, the part one, part two, part three, and I would have all my gnome files together in that folder. Eventually, I'll download this to a stick just by putting my stick in and then select the USB device, and I can then download it onto the machine, or save it rather, I should say. Okay? Alrighty, I hope that clears it up for all of you and that you can complete those corners. Don't forget, if you look at the directions, let me get my little ruler out. Remember, this block is going to be 2.5 by 2.5. And when you go to measure the 2.5 by 2.5, it's that outline right there. That outline measures 2.5 by 2.5. So I'm going to cut right along here for that block. Okay? Now, don't do it like that. Well, there's my sloppy back. So I guess I'll turn it off for this design. Like I said, sometimes it looks nice and neat, and in this case, it's nice and sloppy. So how do I turn off my trimming options? I go over here, and when I load up my design, because I'm going to go back into the cuties, I don't want to be in my Sonnet. Well, what happened here? Okay, let me see if I can get out of this. There it is. Cuties. And I'm going to open up the gnome. And there's my shamrocks. And I've got the bigger hoop now, so I need to change it back to 260 by 200. All right, then I want to start up here. So now I hit stitch out or go. And because I turned that opening screen off, I don't have a place to do that. So I have to go up here in this section, settings, and it says automatic thread cutter and automatic jump stitch trim. I'm just going to temporarily turn it to there. And now it's already color sorted. Merged. I want to color sort first. And then it's merged. Now merge, what it does is it prevents the machine from stopping. If you don't select merge, it will stitch out the first one and stop, and then the second one and stop. So what it does with turning off the cutter and selecting merge after you've selected color sort, it will go ahead and then stitch all the blues on your hoop and then stop, and all the greens. Then you put your batting down, and then it'll stitch down all the greens, stop, you trim it, then you go to the next color, it's the placement line for the fabric, and then it'll stop, and then you do the tack down for the fabric, and it'll stop. And then lastly, you'll do the clover. All 4 clovers at once, and then stop. And then you can snip the jump stitches when you're done. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Just email me. Remember, you can do it either one at a time or all 4 at a time. Alrighty. Have fun. Bye-bye.